Well, one of the bright lights in the U.S. Senate, and there aren't many, it's actually kind of dark up there, but one of the bright lights, one of our favorite senators, Senator Mike Lee of Utah. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Mark. It's great to be with you.
Well, it's a pleasure and it's an honor, and I understand that you're throwing down the gauntlet on this upcoming continuing resolution at the end of September regarding Obamacare. Would you explain that?
Yes, I am. Look, the President of the United States has now amended Obamacare, you know, that law that Congress passed without reading it. The President is now saying that it's too complicated, it's too hard for him and his administration to implement it the way the law was written. And so he gave a big concession to big corporate interests a couple weeks ago, saying he's not going to enforce the employer mandate, but he is going to enforce the individual mandate. So what I'm saying is that members of Congress need to say this. The President's not going to implement this law as it's written. The American people shouldn't be required to fund it. So what I'm telling my fellow Republicans, anyone who purports to oppose Obamacare, is that if you oppose it, you will not vote for any continuing resolution that contains funding for further implementation and enforcement of Obamacare. It's that simple. This is how we win. But we've got to stand united behind this effort.
Because these continuing resolutions, Senator Mike Lee, these continuing resolutions do, in fact, fund the continuing implementation of Obamacare, correct?
That's right. That's right. And that's why we have a binary option here. You can either be on the side of funding Obamacare and go ahead and pass a CR that contains Obamacare funding, or you can say, no, I'm not going to vote for anything, not any appropriations measure that contains Obamacare funding. And that's what we've got to do. And so I invite all within the sound of my voice to join me in this effort. This is our last chance, Mark, our last chance to avoid Obamacare's crushing grip. But we can avoid it if we simply convince all Republicans in Congress not to fund it.
And the point is, it actually is instituted, or most of it, starting next year, and we have Republicans really who are playing games, don't we, Senator? They're saying on the one hand they oppose Obamacare and they have these votes to repeal it, which that doesn't work that way. And then on the other hand they vote for continuing resolutions that fund it. And what you're saying is, look, if we have to shut down the government for a while and have a fight, that's up to Obama. It's been done before, and if we're ever going to do it, we ought to do it now.
Yeah, that's right. And it's important to remember, this isn't about a shutdown. Because the point is, Mark, Harry Reid's not going to do that. Harry Reid's not going to shut down the government for a law that's not only increasingly unpopular, but also one that is going to be selectively and unfairly imposed on American families. Obamacare isn't the government. It's a train wreck, as even its author in the Senate has said. So, no, I don't believe, and I hope he won't, shut down the government to defend Obamacare. I don't think
so.
That's
your point is there's no need to shut down the government. Fund it. Just stop funding Obamacare.
That's right. That's all we have to do is don't fund it. So please join with us in the don't fund it effort.
Now, speaking of joining with us in the don't fund it effort, you got a lot of squishes up there. You don't have to name them. We know who they are. Outside of the what we would call the Tea Party caucus or the known conservatives in the Republican caucus in the Senate, what do you think the Republican leadership in the Senate will do?
Well, you know, we've got a couple of members of the Republican leadership who have joined us already. John Cornyn, the senator from Texas, who's the minority whip in the Senate, has joined us. So has John Thune, who's a member of the Republican minority leadership in the Senate. And so this is a growing effort. It's still budding, but we need support, and we'll get support as members of the Senate and members of the House receive calls from constituents saying, "Don't fund Obamacare."
Now, the continuing resolution comes up on September 30th, and then the debt ceiling comes up in November because they're stealing assets out of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and leveraging those to put off the debt ceiling issue until November. So these things are going to come pretty fast back to back, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They are. But I think it's important to fight the Obamacare battle first with the first issue, which is the continuing resolution that comes up at the end of September. That's a closer connection. There's a closer nexus between that and Obamacare funding. And we also don't have much time to lose, Mark. We've got to fight this as soon as possible, and that's another reason why the CR is the appropriate place to fight it.
Do you get a sense that there's actually Republicans who'd be perfectly happy to leave Obamacare alone and just let it get instituted?
Well, I do have the sense that most or all Republicans are against it. They don't want it. But there seem to be some who have sort of resigned themselves to it. And that's the part that's so distressing, is that so many of us were elected specifically for the purpose of fighting against Obamacare and stopping it. And we've now had CR after CR that has funded Obamacare enforcement and implementation. Now, there are reasons for that. People hoped and expected that the Supreme Court would invalidate it. They should have. Initially, they were going to, and then John Roberts changed his mind. And then people hoped and they expected that a Republican would win the presidential election in 2012. Well, those things have all proven to be pipe dreams. They didn't materialize. This is our last chance, our last-ditch effort to save us from Obamacare, and that's why we've got to do this now.